Good morning. Thanks a lot for joining us today, and we welcome you to this webinar, a very interesting one and the subject at heart personally, but I also take the Gozo Business Chamber for supporting me in making this happen. And I also thank our partners in this webinar. This is a webinar organized by the Gozo Business Chamber along with Europe Direct Gozo in collaboration with the Bank of Valletta, Business and Professional Women, Valletta, Malta, an important NGO on achieving better gender balance. We also work on other aspects, and I'm also a member of this NGO, along with European Women on Boards. And today we'll be focusing on promoting awareness and dialogue around the EU Women on Boards Directive, which is now in effect, and also its implementation not only within the EU, but directly also in our country, Malta. The session will be exploring how this important legislative milestone is shaping corporate governance standards, how it is also advancing equal opportunities and driving cultural change within leadership structures. And cultural change is key. Legislation is important, but without cultural change, we cannot move forward. And in this regard, beyond fulfilling legal obligations, the discussion will also highlight the broader enhanced decision-making, innovation, and long-term competitiveness. These are also key aspects in making this directive and this legislation also effective. I will start by also bringing in Michael Galea, who is the president of the Gozo Business Chamber, to pass on some introductory remarks, and later we'll have also interesting presentations and also time for the Q&A. In the meantime, any questions which pop up, you can already post them in the Q&A session in the chat, so we will address them within our Q&A slot. Michael?
Thank you, Josianne, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Gozo Business Chamber, I would like to warmly welcome you to today's webinar, Women on Boards, Advancing Gender Balance in Leadership. This is a timely and important discussion. At European level, we are witnessing a clear shift in expectations around corporate governance and board composition, particularly through the introduction of new frameworks aimed at strengthening balance and transparency at leadership level. While these measures are specifically targeted at listed companies, their implications go well beyond. They are setting a direction that is already influencing governance practices across the wider business community. For Malta and Gozo, where the economy is predominantly made up of small and micro enterprises, this is still highly relevant. Even where there is no direct legal obligations, such developments are likely to shape expectations among investors, financial institutions, partners, and stakeholders. In practical terms, this means that businesses of all sizes may increasingly need to reflect on how their leadership structures are composed, how decisions are taken at board and management level, and how they position themselves in a more competitive and transparent business environment. This is not simply about compliance, it is about strengthening governance, improving decision-making, and ensuring that organizations are equipped to grow sustainably over a long term. Today's session, therefore, provides an important opportunity to better understand these developments and to explore what they mean in practice for companies operating in Malta and Gozo. We are particularly pleased to be collaborating with Europe Direct Gozo, Bank of Valletta, Business and Professional Women Valletta Malta, and the European Women on Boards, and to have with us speakers who bring both practical experience and a strong European perspective. I would like to thank them to their time and contribution. I encourage all participants to actively engage in the discussion, particularly during the question and answer session. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to a very insightful session.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your short remarks, but very important ones indeed. And definitely to ensure better gender balance, we need males on board. And that's very much important to continue passing on the message and to make this happen. I will now immediately pass the floor first to Miss Mariella Camilleri and afterwards to Hedvig Nuyens, who will be delivering also interesting presentations on the matter. And to introduce Mariella, I wanted also to share a bit of her background. Mariella is a seasoned finance and corporate strategist with over 26 years of experience spanning banking, venture capital, and cross-border transactions across Europe and Asia. Originally from Malta, Mariella spent 30 years in New York before returning, bringing with her a global mindset and extensive international network. Mariella served as president of Business and Professional Women Valletta Malta for 7 years and currently also sits on BPW Europe Executive Board and holds the role of Communications Director. She's the first Maltese to do so. She also sits on several corporate and NGO boards, including the Breaking Silence movement in Paris, and contributes to national policy through her roles on the Consultative Council for Women's Rights, the Oversight Commission for Women, Peace and Security, and Empower. A connector, mentor, and advocate, Mariella is driven by a clear mission to elevate women into leadership, strengthen governance, and build impactful global networks. Mariella, the floor is yours, and I look forward also to your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you for inviting me to speak at this important talk. I think it is of utmost importance to bring visibility to what is actually needed and what role we all can play on the subject matter. So today I want to pivot a little bit. I just don't want to talk about, women on boards, but I want to talk about, how we're going to get a seat at the table, where we're going to get there. So I want to talk primarily on the gender KPI advantage of why it is important to have gender diverse leadership. So we've spent years talking about getting women a seat at the table. This I've been saying it for a number of years. But today I want to challenge that thinking, because the real question that we're all faced with is not, are women at the table? It is, who is shaping the decisions at the table? Because representation without influence is simply optics. And we've had so many of those. So now we need to go into the nitty-gritty and the important roles that we all should be playing. So what we need now, especially now, is impact. And I want to take Malta as a prime example. Malta has been primarily male-dominated when it comes to the business sector, but we're seeing a focus change. So we've made progress, real progress. However, I still think that it's not enough. If we look around, we see that 36% of the managers in Malta are women. So it's still way below what the standard should be. And nearly 37% of leadership roles are now held by women, still way low. But when it comes to decision making, we see that only 19% of board directors are women, and in listed companies it drops down to below 10%. That is way too low and way below what we need to have a clear impact. We have built the pipeline. We have a number of women who have experience, significant experience, to be able to take the leadership. So if we look at things that we're facing against, we're going against, is that Europe, the range is between 30 to 35%, but Malta is still way below that. But yet, as I said, the executive control remains male-dominated. And as you see over here, senior management for women is between 25 and 30%, with the C-suite only between 20 and 25%, and boards it's between 20 and 25% on average as the representation. It's not a board problem. This is a decision-making power problem. Presence is not power. Advisory is not authority. Visibility is not influence. We need to have real influence, and it sits where strategy is defined, risk is taken, and capital is deployed. We need to be present. We need to have a voice. We need to have a say. So it's not about fairness. This is a performance strategy. Gender diverse leadership delivers better decision making, better risk management, and better outcomes. And the main reason it is because when you have all genders represented, it's going to be a collaboration. It's going to be a fusion of the way men and women move forward when it comes to making decisions, and the way the road to growth and to success is generated as geared for businesses. As you can see over here on the screen, it's when there's diversity, is lower risk, higher returns, and stronger oversight. This has been proven over and over again as we look at the statistics on a global basis, especially if you look at what S&P has put out there. We don't lack talent in Malta. In fact, we have a lot of talent in Malta. If you look at the history, there are more women that graduate out of the university than men. But somehow then they start dwindling down when it comes to numbers, when it comes to representation. It faces structural access issue. We have cultural bias, leadership perceptions, access constraints, which is rampant here in Malta. We need to change this. We need to open the doors, and we need to help each other to achieve this. In the last few years, I've seen it more and more that corporate Malta is progressing. Societal Malta is lagging though. So let's look at what's going on. The largest employer in Malta is the government, and the government has made significant movement forward to try to include and increase the number of women on leadership roles and also on boards when it comes to governmental entities or parastatal entities. So we need to change that. So what we need, and the other thing that we're seeing is a matter of succession. Historically, in Malta, succession has always been to the eldest boy, the eldest male in the family, or the male children in the family. Now we're seeing that there aren't that many men who want to continue, either don't want to continue in the line of the family, or they don't have any men as siblings or children. So we're seeing many, many more women now walking into the leadership roles on the C-suite, and also at times roles on the board. But this needs to increase. It cannot be just a matter of succession. It has to be a matter of equity contribution. We need to look at the true value that women bring to the table, that women bring to the success of the corporation. As you can see over here, we're looking at the scorecard, right? When it's female-led or diverse, we've got higher profitability, between 3 to 8%, there's sustainable growth, there's a lower risk and volatility. We're talking about 10 to 20%, which is significant. The governance quality, there's stronger oversight. Decision quality, it's at least 15% better. What we see is, and this is, if you look at it from a day-to-day perspective at every level within the organizations, men and women approach things in a different way. They take the road very differently. Men seem to be quite more eager to change. They move forward quickly, while women take their time to reach a decision. They analyze and analyze and analyze. And sometimes it is to their own detriment, especially when it comes to taking on a role that's been offered to them. So we need to change this. We need to make sure that we have the influence of both male and women. We need to have the presence of both men and women. So it cannot be that we, ignore the women. We've got to bring them to the table. So I'm going to leave you all with a few thoughts that I have. We're looking at the action plan. We need to talk about how we're going to get women on boards. We need to look at the pipeline of women that we have. If it's necessary, let's give them experience. I believe strongly in shadow boards. I believe strongly in taking women who are maybe starting to get into the managerial position. They're not yet at the C-suite level, but let's give them experience. Let's give them, let's let them shadow the board so they know exactly what it entails. Let's build the succession. This is not family or business ownership succession. This is succession to get on boards. Let's not have the same individuals over and over on the same boards. Because when you look at the statistics, one of the things that I didn't mention is, although if you're looking at, there are, let's say, 100 women on boards in Malta, they not necessarily mean that there are 100 different women. It means that there are 100 females present on boards. Some of them, they had 2 or 3 positions with different entity. For the men, it's the same thing. Sometimes the representation is higher. We need to bring the other women with us. Men should not be afraid to bring in women to the table, and they should refer prospective board members. We need to set targets. We need to track the KPIs, and we need to align governance. If it's not measured, it's not managed. I think this slide says everything that there is. So I know my time, probably we're getting there. So I just want to end up with a few words. Gender balance is not diversity initiative. It's a performance strategy. It is all related to the performance of the company. Let's make sure that we can set the stage for a company to perform at its utmost, not only at the board level, but also at the senior management level and the C-suite level. And then I just want to end up with this statement that I love to say. So it's not about a seat at the table. It's about shaping the agenda. We do not lack talent, we lack access. Now, here's the phrase that I love to say. If a seat is not offered, we bring our own chairs. Let's make sure we're there. Still, if spaces are not offered, let's build a table. Let's make sure there's a table that's big enough for us to be there. So I want to thank you all for your attention today, and I look forward to engaging further with anybody who's interested in learning more about what it should entail to be present on boards and in decision-making roles. Thank you for your invitation. I'm so happy to be here today.
Thank you so much, Mariella, for bringing in so much thoughts that we should mull upon to implement, and also for bringing in some statistics and some local perspective. And I'll take from you a few quotes that you shared that I think it's important to keep them in mind. Diversity is not a value statement, it is a governance strategy. If it's not measured, it's not managed. And that's here comes the importance also of statistics and keeping record of advancement. And then my favorite one, which I've heard from you before, but which also is something that I'd like to emphasize here, is that if we're not offered a seat at the table, let's bring our own chair. And with that, I pass on to our next important speaker, Hedvig Nuyens. Thank you for being with us. A few words about Hedvig. Hedvig is the chair of European Women on Boards. Her most recent success is the Women on Boards Directive, requiring gender balance in the boardroom in stock-listed companies throughout the whole of the European Union. In the last 30 years, Hedvig has mentored hundreds of women pro bono, helping them build the careers they aspire to. She also authored a book on the glass ceiling and is a well-known speaker, and it was excellent also to have her with us during our BPW conference in Malta last year. Next to this, she is also a very influential leader in finance, representing the banking industry worldwide, and the chair of E3G, a climate change think tank working on solutions worldwide to transition to net zero. Hedvig has been married for over 40 years and has 3 children and 1 grandchild. And with that, the floor is yours, dear Hedvig. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Daniel and Josiane. It's a real honor to be with you, and I will speak, of course, about women on boards. I will first explain in a few slides what this directive is about, so that you understand what the directive aims at and how Malta has implemented it. But I will also try to share some very practical advice, just as Mariela did, on what works to have more women on boards. The benefits, I think, have been explained very eloquently by Mariela, but I will also speak about my own board journey. And I know there are many men and women in the room. And so if you have questions on how do you get more women on boards and how perhaps you can get on a board yourself, what you think, what you ask, please write it in the chat, and there will be time. Josianne will lead the Q&A session. This is, of course, very much about you and what you can get from this session. So I'm going to share my presentation, Josianne, right now. And of course, I will give the presentation also to the organizers so that you can actually look at it again afterwards. So the EU directive was voted in 2022, and all the member states had to implement it by the 28th of December, and that is exactly what Malta has been doing. So the targets that are put forward have to be met by the end of next month. So we are very, very near, close to the deadline, and it is applicable to the stock listed companies. If I have looked at the Malta Stock Exchange, there are 35 in Malta, and SMEs are exempted or can be exempted, and that this has been done in the Malta law. What are the objectives? You can choose either non-executive directors should be at least 40% female, either you look at executive and non-executives, and then the level should be at 33%. So just to, perhaps not everyone knows about, an executive director, that can be the CEO, the CFO, the management committee, to say so. In a supervisory board, most of the time you have a combination. Sometimes the CEO is also part of the supervisory board, but then you have non-executives. So hence the difference that has been made by the EU regulation, but you can clearly see that targets are there. Now, every country needs to appoint a promotion body. So in Malta, that has been set for the National Commission for the Promotion of Equality. They have to really be the sponsor of the law. And then you have actually an authority who has to check. This is the Malta Financial Services Authority that leads this role, and they really have to check the numbers, see what measures have been taken, and also see whether the company is publishing the numbers on its website. Now, when companies are below the target, they need to put in place processes, measures, and the EU directive is all about nominating the best candidate. So the EU directive foresees that the selection processes should be much more quality proof, should ensure objective processes, and when two candidates are equally qualified, you should choose for the women if the objective has not been met just yet. And companies will also have to be able to explain why they appoint one candidate rather than another. So that's also a big, big change. There are penalties, so in that sense that if companies do not match the objective, they will have to be able to explain and showcase which measures they have been taken. Now, where is Malta? Where is Malta at this point? So these are the numbers in 2020 from 2022. So when the directive was actually voted, and you can see Malta is here. So I have I have shown you here the ranking of the 27 countries based on which countries have actually already had objectives in the past. And actually they all are in the green now. So countries that have started earliest with objectives like Italy, France, Netherlands, Belgium, Spain, they are all above 40%, whereas countries that have so far never had to put objectives in place, either they are in black with very low numbers, either in red. So you can clearly see that setting objectives works. Now, Malta started, just for your reference, in 2012, we only had 2% women in boards in Malta, and Malta was at the absolute last position in the EU. A few years later, you were third last. Now, actually, you are fifth last. So you can see here in the graph, it's only Bulgaria, Hungary, Estonia, and Cyprus who are behind, even more behind. But Malta is in a place where it can only go up, and that is precisely what we want to explain in this webinar. Now, what works? I think that Mariela has said it already. Setting objectives really works. It really works. Objectives for non-executives or for non-executives and executive directors, and the EU is clear. We know that whenever you only recruit members from your own network, as is often the case in, how would I say, more traditional societies, it is a much lower chance that you will actually diversify your choices. So by having a more professional selection process with a nomination and remuneration committee, which is absolutely the norm for stock listed companies, you really get in another position and you will actually broaden your scope. The law says you need to define the board profile, look for specific competencies, qualifications, and it's strongly also advised to publish vacancies, which happens way too little so far. Actively look for female talent. Female networks like BPW or EWOP can help. We offer this for free whenever chairs or remuneration committees are reaching out to me. I have a firm promise I can deliver 3 female candidates for each board profile. It has never missed so far, at least 3. And then what is also important, I think, whenever you want to have more women, it's not only about women, and perhaps not even primarily about women, it's about getting a much better board. So my advice is always, of course, you need to have women on boards, but if you are looking, think more broadly. What are the talents you have already, the skills, the profiles, the background, and try to broaden this to what do you actually need at board level. And that means that both for nomination of men and women, you're going to have your checklist of what you really need in the board to make it a performant board and a board that really can help your company. And that means be much more selective, both for nominating women and men. And if you broaden that talent pool outside Malta, outside the man you have in your network already, you will actually have a much better choice. Now, I think benefits of diversity, Mariela has said it all, improved decision making. We actually all know this. So it is not by lack of rational arguments. We have said it time and again. It is about trying to understand how the culture, the values of a board evolve, and what we can change in this. Now, my own journey to the board, let me tell that in a few words. The first thing I did with hindsight is really build a wide variety of skills, and that is especially also to the men and women in this room that want to become a board member. Actually, every board profile is set of a number of skills, competencies you need. And everything you need in an executive board, you need in the board as well. So people with knowledge of risk, finance, marketing, IT, AI now. It can also be export, it can be manufacturing. So really in your career, you build a wide variety of skills that will be able to be useful at board level. Then I moved the ranks in different corporations. I switched a couple of times. So I built experience about cultures, about geographies, about industries. And quite soon in my career, I was 32 years old, I started representing my company in related companies. So when I was a CFO of my university, I was actually nominated in boards of the spin-offs of the university. I was nominated as a board director in the student restaurants, out of all places, in the company that was selling books. So I was actually appointed by my company, and I also accepted this, to represent my company in related companies. I then volunteered to join a big not-for-profit board. And since then, since 5 years, I can say that I've been headhunted repeatedly based on what I reflect and what I actually offer in my LinkedIn profile. So visibility is extremely important. Be clear in your LinkedIn profile that you are available for a board position, and that is how actually headhunters come to me, how board chairs come to me. And most of the time, they come to me when they really have nobody in their own environment, in their own network, because they need 10 different things that are so difficult to find. They don't have it in their own club of friends. What I also would like to explain and say specifically about Malta and other countries is that the issue or the item of women on boards is actually encapsulated in something bigger that Mariella has been alluding to a couple of times. It's about the journey of corporate governance. It's about the journey of a more mature board. It's about the journey of companies that want to grow and that are faced with barriers in terms of export, barriers in terms of growth, barriers in terms of innovation. So when companies understand that it is better to have a board that really is a board that challenges you, really is important to have a board that supports you, that you actually will become more relevant. So I will stop there, Josianne, and available for questions. I think you're on mute, Josianne. We have a question already, but suppose you want to lead this.
Okay, we're back. We had a bit of internet connection problem in the meantime, so Hedvig will catch up on your concluding remarks later, but it's great that the webinar continued. I wanted to take a bit some key takeaways from your end, and then we'll go to the questions immediately. First of all, the importance of keeping in mind that there are targets to achieve, as Hedvig has just explained, by end of June this year. So yes, we're very tight in this when it comes to timing, and there's also a lot of improvement that needs to be done also locally. It's good that at least there was progress in the last years, but more progress needs to be made. And what I wanted also to emphasize is what Hedvig stated, and this is very important. It's not only about female talents, but also about different nationalities, backgrounds, competencies, and skills. Basically, this is about diversity. That's why also when we speak sometimes about quotas, we speak of the underrepresented sex, because it's about diversity. And with this, I wanted to also put a question myself. I wanted to ask how can we help SMEs to also unlock female and diverse talent? Because whilst the European EU directive on women on boards is not applicable for SMEs in Malta, it's important that we have a cultural shift and we move beyond legislation, but believing that this is important for governance and society in general. So this is one of my questions. And do we have another question?
It's more of a
Okay,
comment.
it's more of a comment. Thank you, Mais, for stating that if we don't have a chair on the table, let's have our own table and chair. Yes, I think that that quote is and perspective is very much important. Sometimes as females, we tend to wait for an invitation. We tend to be also waiting for opportunities to crop up. So let's utilize the networks. Hadvit also stated the importance of networks. Let's utilize the networks that are already out there and let's grab the seats at the table ourselves. And I leave it up to you for comments on my questions on SMEs. Thank you.
Yes, of course. And just to give you other examples, so there are other societies, of course, that you know about, like Japan, South Korea, that used to favor boys in the past. But now, of course, with you said it already, much less children in a lot of small companies. You don't have a boy that can take over, and so both in Japan and in South Korea, attention has now shifted to the education of the girls. If there is one girl in the family or one girl in the company, this is actually the only chance for the company to survive. So I believe that also with demographics, it's just we don't have any other choice. We need to look at every talent, and it's very important for girls, but they are doing this already, to study and to see how can we actually, if we speak about an SME, include them in the family business just as you would include any other family member. And we also see that sometimes, I saw that in a Belgian family-owned business lately, when the council, the family council, deliberated on who should we appoint next in the family, they looked at all the grandchildren, and it appeared without any doubt that the granddaughter was the most qualified to be appointed on behalf of the family in the board. So that idea of a family that evolves through sons and the son of the son, I think it's completely outdated. It doesn't work anymore. It also helps for daughters, I think son and daughters, to encourage them to study abroad, to start something else, to come back then to the family business. So to really build that experience from a very young age. And that is for me the best way for SMEs to stay successful and relevant.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a very good point indeed. And I think that having also instilling the entrepreneurial spirit from a very young age, also amongst females, is very much important, as is the question of succession that Mariella also mentioned in her presentation. Mariella, I'm sure you'll have some comments on this aspect too.
I think it's and Malta is already being implemented. It's been on for a while because, as I mentioned earlier, there are less and less male members of the siblings who are ready to take on the role. Sometimes there aren't any. But we've seen the change that we're seeing more so than ever is that women are coming up from the family. They're taking over the roles at the C level and at the board level. They are being, they are the true successors in carrying the business forward, especially when it's family-owned businesses. So I think we're seeing this change. We need more of this, though. It shouldn't be that, just because it's a family-owned business, but it should also be for small businesses where there are so many capable women around. And I don't see why, when they're headhunting for the next leader of the company and the chair of the board or members of the board, why should we still go to the old boys network and go through that pool? I think it should be, and with the equality and the equity laws and that are being implemented, I think this is going to continue to change. But we need to take action now. We need to continue now. And we need to really look at what the contribution is. It is an equity contribution. It's not about equality. It's about equity and what the benefits are for the business and the employees alike.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. That's very true indeed. And we have a couple of more comments and questions in the chat. So first of all, Euphemia is congratulating you on your speech. And she said that she'll be happy to collaborate with European women on boards, exchanging data and experiences. Also, Eufemia is BPW Europe Working Group Chair for Women on Boards. And definitely, it's a pleasure that today, also as Gozo Business Chamber, we're facilitating this discussion because it's these networks and the continuance of the discussion which matters. This shouldn't be just a webinar, but putting people together, collaborating, and seeing how to break the glass ceilings. And yes, how to break and address the old boys network that also Mariella just mentioned. And then Anna Borch asked a question, can you explain in more detail how professionalizing the selection process works in terms of private companies? Hedvig, I don't know whether you'd like to take that.
Of course.
And then Mariella
So,
will have some additional
of
comments.
course,
Thank
please,
you.
for the audience, if you want to connect to me via LinkedIn, it's very easy. And then if we don't answer all the questions, we can continue to the discussion. But how were boards actually constituted before? Just for you to understand. In traditional companies, the board was actually a group of people you knew already. So you start with the board, you have the founder most of the time, and then he looks for somebody with a little bit of knowledge here or an introduction there. So you actually constitute a board from your own network and very often from the group of trusted friends or relationships you had already. That can work, but it can work to a certain point, and it certainly doesn't entitle you to have a board that is really going to do what a board should do, and that is challenge and support the executive committee. Now, how is it in a professional setup? In a professional setup, you're going to ask yourself, what are the skills I need in a board? All the skills I was talking about, risk, finance, but also the other skills, reputation management, it can be lobbying, it can be regulation. You're going to ask, what are the markets I need to know about? Am I just going to stay in Malta, or would I like to export to Italy, or is it the Middle East? What are the key skills that I need in my board? What are the key backgrounds that I need? And then you're going to see, what do you have already in your board? And it's really an assessment. It's a professional process. I can give you more details later on after this call. And you're going to either go out yourself and look for profiles you're missing. Either you ask a headhunter, and the headhunter will specifically have as target to bring you 10, 15 candidates that are actually matching the profile you want. And you're going to make sure to have a variety of candidates that then go for interviews, etc., etc. So a professional hiring process is just as you would do for hiring an employee, but it is with a much wider perspective to add candidates with very specific profiles. And then, of course, you still need to see whether there is a match, whether the person understands your culture, whether the person matches with the personality of the other board members, because, of course, it's not just individuals, you need to work as a board. But I can tell you, professional searches are more and more now the norm, and it's just the only thing that will also guarantee you a much wider pool of candidates. And then, of course, you still need to find the best one.
May I also add another follow-up question, and then if Mariella or yourself have any comments on the question by Anna or Diz. Again, I keep in mind our SMEs, given that our economy is based mostly on SMEs, not only within Malta, but also within the EU. So how would an SME, sometimes a family business, we have a lot of family businesses too, go about conducting a professional process? Like any tips you would give? They might not afford a headhunter because of lack of resources, but definitely in both your experiences, you could give some tips.
So what I would advise then is to start with a board advisor, a strategic advisor. So you can start small, but really look for a consultant or an advisor with board experience, with experience in strategy, that can actually guide the family to grow or to actually stay competitive. So you can start smaller, but look specifically for a consultant or an advisor with board experience. So you don't have all the legal complications from the start, but it is really important to understand that even for smaller SMEs, it is crucial to have that support and challenge from an external person that is not embedded in the whole family business, understands it, can speak with the founder, can speak with the family, but also is giving some challenge that is so much needed.
If I may, I just want to go a little bit earlier than that. I think we need to understand what the role of the board is more than anything else. You don't have a group of people who are simply consulting. They are your confidants. They are the individuals whom you're going to go to. If you're at this CEO or at the C-suite level, right? You're going to go to get, as a soundboard of what you are thinking of, what direction you want to move, what changes you want to move and make within the company. They are the ones who should be your confidants more than anything else. But at the same time, they're going to be there to guide you and also keep you sort of within the lines so that you don't really, go outside of what the main focus of the business should be, right? Based on what you want to achieve. My experience with entrepreneurs, especially, they are vast-sighted, they're excited, they're go-getters, and they want to move quickly. But sometimes they need someone to sound off with what their thoughts are, and sort of bring them back into focus as to what they need to do to get to and achieve their goals. And I think that is what is important when you're dealing with an SME, a small business that's growing and who maybe for the first time is putting together a board. I think what Hedwig just said is perfect. If you don't have the expertise or you don't have anyone who basically can bring you the right people to go to a consultant, an expert who's been on board, who has the experience, and who can guide you, and make sure that you have every aspect of the business where you need more than anything else, oversight and guidance covered in your board.
Thank you very much, Mariella and Hedwig, both for your feedback and comments. And we'll go back to some comments we received. So linked to Josianne's my question, Vitorine Bayada is saying, I believe education is key, and not only for the upcoming female leaders, but also for the male patriarch and male family members. This applies both for independent women seeking to advance in their professional careers, as well as those seeking to advance within family businesses. Especially when dealing with SME family businesses, these developments can be very delicate matters, and education is key to make sure that they do not feel that the females bring their chairs to the table as threats. A very valid comment indeed. And then we have a question by Anovix. Thank you also for joining us from abroad. And she states, congratulations on organizing this important webinar and excellent speakers. I am Anovix, BPW Europe Regional Coordinator. Women on boards is a key issue in women empowerment. BPW Europe is working on to have more women on boards, to encourage women to take the step. Along the way, many women do not reach the board positions. And a very pertinent question is, where is the hole in the pipeline? And before I get back to Hedwig and Mariella for that, I will also share the last comment and question from Norma Camilleri. And she states, a thank you for both our speakers for their presentations and for GBC for organizing this. My question is in relation to boards not related to SMEs. So I understand if it is beyond the scope of this webinar and cannot be addressed. I often sit in decision-making meetings where barely 10% of us are female. And these are government councils or committees. I totally agree with the suggestions, Ms. Nguyen's, with regards to us pushing and promoting ourselves. But apart from that, what can we do so policies reflect gender balance? I believe we should promote our skills and abilities and be on boards, because as Mariella's presentation showed, we can bring new ideas rather than being there simply to satisfy a quota. So what measures should policymakers take to strike a balance? And it's also an important question because obviously policymakers need to continue supporting also the policies and the frameworks to ensure that we reach the goal of the legislation which is already in place. I leave you with those last two questions, and I think everyone from the audience for participating also and putting their questions. We'll get Hedvig and Mariella's comments, and then we'll pass on to the concluding remarks a bit later.
But so to start with the policies, so it's clear that the EU directive is a very important step. You have to know that it took 10 years. It took 10 years to be voted. So just to explain how sensitive it was for some countries, how sensitive it was for members of parliament and heads of state. But so we managed to get through, and the directive is a very nice balance of not saying you should have women because they are women. No, we should have gender balance because we need the best candidates. So the whole directive is based on the idea of better processes, better selection, and actively looking for female talent and the best possible board directors. So I think that that is how it should be and should go. Of course, you can take other measures. For example, in the banking industry where I'm working, the supervisor is now looking at diversity in the board as a matter of risk management, not only gender. So because all what Mariella says is true. Banks with only male board, full male board, banks with only men at the top are more risky and less profitable. So that's not what the supervisor wants. So the diversity criteria is part of the regulation and supervision of banks. So should shareholders look at this again. So the policies, you set targets, but it's of course also a matter of good management. I also want to allude to what the comment that was made. Yes, indeed, it can happen that women are seen as a threat, but it's not the only time that you have heard this. I mean, if you look at SMEs, for example, you all know about the difficulty of succession planning. You have a founding father, most of the time founding father, then you have the next generation, and then you have the grandchildren that come in. You can have clashes within the generations. It is not only based on gender. A new child, a younger child brings new ideas. And so it can also be that, for example, if the board was not functioning well, when such a bright young woman enters the board with more education, with better ideas, with challenging ideas, it can lead to a threat. But it's not only confined to women. It's also because the succession of generation and new ideas can come with a challenge. But I think it's a good thing. And sometimes change doesn't come just smoothly, but changes comes with some friction. We all know this, but it is inevitable, and either companies and SMEs will adapt, will reinvent themselves, either they will just shrink and stop. And that's exactly what is happening in Japan. In Japan, you have the highest percentage of businesses that just stop because they didn't manage to find the right succession. And then where is the hole in the pipeline? Well, we have to say that there are many reasons. You know them, I think. They are also valid in Malta. It's not because women are highly educated. It's not because women are starting a job. If you can't combine in a kind of balanced way family and business, your private life and your corporate life, you will lose a lot of women on their way to the top. So it is really essential. Also, it's essential for the Gen Z generation. They want to have something more than just work or just be at the top of corporations. So we need to find ways to adjust different kinds of lifestyle. And so I would say to all women in this room, if you want to know more about what you can do to improve your qualification, improve your visibility, you can reach out to Mariella or me. We are there to give you advice. We need every single talented woman in this room.
Thank you very much, Mariella. You have also some comments from your end.
No, I think what Hedwig just said is perfect. I don't think there's much to add on it. Yes, we're all available to help out, but I think we need to push ourselves as well as women. We know we tend to hesitate, but we need to take the bull by the horns, so to speak. Let's move forward. Let's put ourselves out there, and let's also make sure that, you know, when we're talking about small businesses or medium-sized or parastatal companies, we need to push and push and push to have the presence. We need to make sure that we make everybody aware that there is a reason why there should be more women on boards. There is a reason why we should come to an equal representation. And if we show them what the actual results were for many entities on a global basis, maybe finally people will start to realize, aha, they have that aha moment and say, yes, it is important, because there is a different way of how men and women proceed. As I said earlier, women sometimes are more empathetic, men are more prone to rush decisions. So if we combine the two of them, we can have successful ventures moving forward. Thank you again.
Definitely. Thank you very much to both of you, dear Mariela and Hedvig. I will just quickly read some comments from the chat. Well done on this webinar, says Annabel Zamitpa. Just a comment from my own personal experience. The problem in Malta is that we still suffer from culture passed on from generation to generation. Yes, we need a culture shift. A change in culture is required, sometimes even from women themselves. Unfortunately, women need to work harder at it, as certain home responsibilities still fall mainly on women, so unless support is sought for the woman, usually she needs to create the support herself. It is very difficult to increase women participation, and women are lost in the process. And I think that, yeah, the government in Malta, as Mariela stated earlier, has done a lot on increasing female participation in the workforce. We also introduced a positive gender mechanism for the national parliament, which will be applied the second time around in this month's elections in Malta. So that's something also for our foreign attendees to look at. But when it comes to women on boards and other areas, there's much to do still locally also. Then Euphemia, another congratulations to Mariella. The future commitment of the BPW working group Women on Boards is to develop strategies to implement quota laws in all European countries. And another comment from Vitorine Bayada. I cannot agree more, Ms. Nuyens. It is events such as this one and other ones which the GBC and other organizations organize that will help the females push through the ceiling that there is in Malta. Collective effort will deliver great results, definitely. And with that, I pass on the floor now to our current BPW Valletta Malta President, Janelle Aquilina, who has just been appointed recently. Congrats once again on this role, and we look forward to working with you too. And a few words about Janelle. Ms. Janelle Aquilina is the head of Direct Tax and Corporate Services at Strimer Services Limited, where she advises a diverse portfolio of local and international clients. Janelle graduated as an accountant from the University of Malta and is a warranted certified public accountant. She also obtained a Master of Arts in Taxation from the University of Malta. However, alongside her professional accomplishments, Janelle is deeply committed to leadership and advocacy. As I said, she was elected to the board of BPW Valletta, also previously serving in the board, but now as president, as well as Malta's young representative. And in March 2026, she has just been elected as president. She also serves as finance officer at Malta's National Youth Council and definitely has an important role to play also with our youths to break the glass ceilings. Over to you, Janelle. Thank you for patiently listening in to us. You'll have the concluding remarks, and then also Daniel will pass on some remarks as our CEO from the Gozo Business Chamber. And thank you for joining us, and the floor goes to you.
So thank you for having us today. It was a very insightful discussion, even though I know both of them very well, especially Mariella, was one of my mentors and my previous president. So we've gone through a lot. But as you said, Josianne, I think this issue sits at our hearts, mostly because it is very important for the economic progression, good governance, and also social justice, which brings about, the subject of high representation, both within the C-level suites and also managerial positions, which will lead to the managerial suites. So a bit about BPW and what we stand for and what our principles and how we've been working to promote women taking the lead in their careers is that we do not talk about, equality and, female empowerment and all that. We give the skill and we build on those skills. We have a network. I'm very happy that Anu and Aufemia also managed to join, and I'm seeing also some other members. It is extremely important that we foster the mentorship between these women who have so much potential and so much to give. Also, Annabella used to work with her at Deloitte, so it was nice to see such women working together. I think also at this point in time, it is a very pivotal moment that we need to take this directive and help us to reach certain targets that maybe Malta didn't manage to do in the past. So I think it is just a starting point, and we'll build and hopefully will reach certain targets and not require any quotas for the future, because that is ultimately the goal. Quotas are there to help, but what we would like to achieve is that quotas are no longer required. So it is a very important moment. As also mentioned by you, Josianne, as we know, Malta is very largely driven by the small and medium entities, and more mainly because of our size as well. So they might fall into the exemption of the directive, but I think that this is a ripple effect, and we need to bring this cultural baseline and diversity and take the requirements for large companies and try and implement and find solutions also for these small and medium-sized entities. I think that the legislation targets all the necessary scaffolding, so like the foundations of all that is necessary, but it's for us to build on it. So a bit of what I believe about boards and diversity. I think women have a lot of strengths, bring a lot of diversity, meaning, as Mariella rightly mentioned, the risk awareness, sometimes at the empathy level that is needed in the leadership role, that sometimes we miss when it's just male-dominated boards. Also, driven collaboration with the ESGs and the drivers for consumer insights. So there's a lot that women can offer. So I think that BPW has been working tirelessly to try and bridge the gap between the talented professionals within Malta and as BPW Europe within Europe and internationally. But I think we need more practical examples, so more workshops, reach out for mentorship initiatives. Mariella is one of our mentors in Malta. It is very important also to have panel discussions. It is important to voice your concerns. Sometimes there might be someone who has passed through that experience and can help you to get to where you want to be. But ultimately, I think that we need more men. So I am very disappointed there aren't enough men today joining us. I think that if women keep on talking between us, we know what we want. We know what we want to achieve. We know what we're capable of doing. But unfortunately, if we don't bring the men on board and know our potential and know what we can offer that is different maybe to what is their norm, then we won't really manage to get to where we want to get. So just I'd like to offer anyone who would like to join BPW and the Gozo Chamber maybe for future events. These are all necessary. As Mariella always says, bring the chair. If not the chair, the table. We'll try and break the barriers, but it is very important that you take the first step. And I think the first step is believing in yourselves. Sometimes it might be difficult, but that's the first step. I mean, as Josianne said, I've recently been appointed president. So in the beginning, it was a bit of a change also because of succession. We've been having very knowledgeable and amazing presidents, but the transition to a young has also been a bit of a, let's say, moving, like revolutionizing certain things, because we all think differently, even between us women. So let alone if the women are bringing that same aspect to a board of men.
Thank you very much, Janelle, and I'm sure you'll do an excellent job as Mariella did before you. And I also think Mariella, yes, she's a great mentor to us, and she's a person who pushes younger ones to thrive. And it's true, we do not have a lot of male attendees. We also tried our best as GBC and would have loved to have more males. But definitely, the person next to me, Daniel Borch, our CEO, is a person who pushes also female talent a lot. I joined the council of Gozo Business Chamber thanks to him. Also, he believed in my potential, but apart from that, he also wanted to bring more female talent on board. So we might start with a younger male audience, but definitely it's important to keep pushing because there are some real supportive males out there too. And definitely the mentorship initiative and not shying away from seeking advice, key advice that also Janelle here has shared with us that we need to keep in mind. Over to you, Danielle, and thank you once again. When I mentioned organizing this webinar in collaboration also with BBW and European Women on Boards and other partners who supported us, Danielle immediately told me, yes, definitely. So I am looking forward to your concluding remarks, and I thank you all for joining us today.
So thank you, Josianne, for your very kind words as usual, but thank you. Thank you, Hedwish, thank you, Mariella, and thank you, Janelle. I would like to thank you all for your very valuable and insightful contributions, which I believe were really a mind opener for me from a male perspective. And today's webinar highlighted that the developments at European level, including the Women on Boards Directive, must be seen on a broader shift towards corporate governance and leadership. And while it is true the directive applies to listed companies, I think that we must see its influence to extend much further. Expectations around governance, transparency, and leadership structures, and how these are evolving, and how these changes will increasingly be felt across the wider business community. For Malta and Gozo, where our economy is largely composed of small and micro enterprises, I believe, and I sincerely believe, that this presents both a challenge and an opportunity. I was born, and this is something personal, I have not written here. I was born in a family business. My father had a family business, but my mother was a very strong character. And though my father appeared as she was really the brains, she was the motivating force. So I think I grew in that culture, and I really believe that the input that women can bring is significant, much more than we men can bring, their perspective, their view on things. But I believe that all that is happening around us is a challenge that requires businesses to reflect on their structures, their decision-making process, and how they position themselves in a changing environment. But apart from a challenge, I believe that this is also an opportunity. Bringing women on board, like what we have in the council with Josianne and other women, it's a richness. It's a richness. Because at the end, it's not ultimately about abiding by laws or meeting formal requirements. I believe it is about recognizing that a more balanced leadership brings about richness to the decision-making process. It introduces different perspectives, it strengthens discussions at board level, and leads to more informed and forward-looking outcomes. Even before this meeting, we were discussing about our event, Josianne gave me her perspective. It was an added perspective, a richer perspective, and I said, look, it's true what she's saying to me. So we must not say, if I'm not using the right words, this diversity as a challenge but as a richness. And in a business environment that is becoming increasingly complex, I believe that this diversity of thought is not a luxury, but a necessity. And as the Gozo Business Chamber, we see our role as supporting this transition by continuing to inform, engage, and provide platforms such as today's session for meaningful discussion. So I look forward to continue working with our partners, including Europe Direct Gozo, Bank of Valletta, PPW, Valletta, and the European Women on Boards to ensure that all the business community remains informed and prepared for these developments.
Thank you, Daniel. Very important insights indeed. And let's conclude this webinar today by also promising ourselves to keep in touch and to help each other to break ceilings, achieve targets, not only legislative ones, but beyond, to ensure that we have also a more diverse society and boards which have better insight and decision-making power with all talent on board. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a good afternoon. Thanks for all the locals who joined us, and thanks also to our speakers, partners, and also the foreign attendees who also made time to join this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.